Let's start talking about what's called the Megillat Esther in Hebrew, or the Scroll of Esther. It's one of the books of the Bible. Remember, the Tanakh has 929 chapters. We're talking about the Hebrew Bible, 929 chapters, over 23,000 verses. It's a massive book. It's a very long book. And so, contained within the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, is the Megillat Esther, or the Scroll of Esther. The name Megillat Esther, Scroll of Esther, it literally, that's how you write in Hebrew, but it literally means to reveal what is hidden. When I say it literally means that, I mean that the Hebrew words Megillah, right, ligalot means to reveal. Esther, the name Esther comes from the Hebrew root samech taf resh, which means hidden. So it literally means to reveal what is hidden. That's what the name means. Okay, we translate it as the Scroll of Esther, but its literal translation is to reveal what is hidden. So tonight, or whatever time of day it is for wherever you find yourself, but tonight we're going to reveal what is hidden. And I think you're going to really see some extraordinary things. Stick with me till the end. It's going to unfold, and we're going to see some really amazing things. Now, this is what the scroll actually looks like. When it's handwritten by a scribe called a sofer, it's a specialized art. I happen to be a licensed sofer. I'm an expert in this kind of writing. And this is what it looks like in the original Hebrew. Okay. Now we're going to begin. I'm going to assume that you don't know the whole story in great detail. So I'm going to begin with a quick summary of the entire book, chapter by chapter. Very quick summary. So chapter one begins. Okay. Now, actually, let me add one note here, is that the story takes place approximately 2,500 years ago. The first temple, which had been built by King Solomon, was destroyed. Okay. And the second temple, which would later be built by a man named Zerubbabel, right, has yet to be built. And this story is taking place in between the destruction of the first temple and the building of the second temple. There's about a 70-year gap between the first and the second temples. The Persian Empire is the major empire in the world at the time. The Babylonian Empire had already fallen, and now the Persian Empire is controlling the world. And that is the setting for when the story of the events of the Book of Esther takes place. So in chapter one, the king of the Persian Empire, the Megillah, the Book of Esther calls him Achashverosh, okay? And in chapter one, he holds two giant parties, okay? One larger one for the entire empire, and one in his capital. And he has his wife Vashti called to the party, and she refuses to come. And so he exiles her. Some commentators say that he killed her, but doesn't say that explicitly, but he gets rid of her. Let's put it that way. And that's what happens in chapter one and chapter two. So there's a search begins for a new queen, right? You can't exile your queen and live on your own. You need a new queen. So there's a whole mechanism, beauty contests around the entire empire. And eventually, the new queen is crowned, and her name is Esther. Right? Her name is also Hadassah. She has more than one name. And Esther had been adopted by someone named Mordecai. Right? Mordecai was one of the exiles from Jerusalem, from Israel. He had been exiled, and Mordecai had adopted Esther. Some say he was married to her, but he tells her, do not share your Jewish identity with the king, with Ahasuerus. Don't let him know that you're Jewish. Just pretend, right? You're not Jewish. So together, um, Mordecai and Esther were also told in chapter 2, save King Ahasuerus from a plot. There were two palace staffers plotting to poison King Ahasuerus. And at the end of chapter 2, Mordecai finds out about the plot. He tells Esther, who shares it with the king in the name of Mordecai, and the king is saved. And that's sort of like an afterthought to the end of chapter 2, but it will become important as we'll get back to that. Chapter 3 tells us about the advisor to the king. His name is Haman, or in Hebrew it's pronounced Haman. And Haman doesn't like the Jewish people. So he convinces King Ahasuerus have all the Jews in the empire executed on one day. And that day is on the Hebrew month of Adar, on the 13th day of the month. And that is going to be the day where all the Jews will be executed. Chapter 4, right? Mordecai gets wind of this. He's mourning. He's dressed in sackcloth. He's crying. And so he sends a message to Esther and he prevails upon her. You have to intercede before the king. You have to go and say something to the king, because if you don't, we're in trouble, right? So Esther concedes. She says, okay, I'll go, even though she initially refuses, and she has to do it in a particular manner. So what does she do? She goes and invites the king, and she also invites Haman to a private party. At that party, what does she do? She invites them both to a second party. So Haman goes home and he's very upset, and he doesn't like this idea that Mordecai, right, is not bowing down to him. And so he decides, consulting with his family, he builds gallows and he's going to hang Mordecai, right, who had refused to bow to him, and he would kill Mordecai, and then he could go to the party and he can be happy. So what happens? So now in chapter 6, right, the king, Ahasuerus, he's unable to sleep. He's tossing and turning. And he asks that the book of Chronicles, his history of the empire, should be brought to him so he could read it. And he reads it, and he comes to the page that says that Mordecai had once saved his life. Remember back in chapter 2 that I mentioned here, chapter 2, that Mordecai saved the life of the king. And so at the same moment, Haman is walking in to the king's, walking into the palace. He's about to ask the king for permission to hang Mordecai. And as Haman walks in, the king says, hey, what have we done to reward Mordecai for saving my life? And Haman says, we didn't do anything. And so the king says, hey, go take him. You, Haman, go take Mordecai, put him on a horse, parade him around the city in the royal garments, and shout in front of him. This is what the king does to someone who he finds favor. So, of course, Haman is dramatically disappointed. He came in there thinking he's getting permission to kill Mordecai, and what happens? He has to go honor Mordecai. Chapter 7, at the second party, Esther tells the king that Haman wishes to exterminate her people, and she reveals that she is in fact a Jew. The king is enraged. The king has Haman strung up on the gallows. He hangs Haman on the gallows that Haman had prepared for Mordecai, this great turnaround. In chapter 8, orders are then issued in King Ahasuerus' name, authorizing the Jews to defend themselves and kill those who wish to kill them. Chapter 9, the Jews defend themselves on the 13th of Adar, the day they were supposed to be exterminated. They rest from the war on the 14th of Adar. And in the capital, though, in the capital city of Shushan, they need an extra day. So they fight for one more day, and they don't rest until the 15th day of the Hebrew month of Adar. Esther has all these events that we've just discussed recorded, and the scrolls are then sent to Jews all over. And in the final chapter, the events are included in the records of Persia and Media, and Mordecai is a wildly popular viceroy. He becomes second in command. That, my friends, is a summary of the 10 chapters. Now, we just did that in a couple minutes, but the story actually takes place over about a decade, and that will become significant. Okay, now stick with me, folks. I'm going to show you something absolutely extraordinary. And for those who have been on this study before, may have seen this, it is absolutely worth reviewing every word that I'm about to share. There is something called a chiasm, or a chiastic structure. Okay, let me explain to you what that is. Now, if you look at the letters, most of you, I assume, are English readers. Or if you're a Hebrew reader, you could look in this sign, right? You see, I have the letter A and the letter Z, right? The first letter of the English alphabet and the last letter. You have the second letter of the English alphabet and the second to last letter, the same on the Hebrew side. Okay, so just to show you, this is the Hebrew alphabet. That's the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet corresponding to the last one. You have the second in the Hebrew alphabet corresponding to the second to last. Okay, or in English, same idea, A corresponding with Z, B to Y, right? C to X, D to W, and so on. A chiastic structure is when you look at an entire text and you look at the beginning and you say, A looks a lot like Z, the end of the book, right? B, meaning the second part of the book, looks a lot like the second to last part of the book. And we see an incredible structure. Don't worry if you did not understand a word I just said, because I'm going to show you the example from the Book of Esther, and it is going to blow your mind. So just stay with me, folks. Don't worry if you didn't understand. I was just giving you the theoretical concept. On to our next slide. The beginning of the Book of Esther starts with an introduction, tells you about the kingdom of the king, Ahasuerus. He had 127 provinces. He's throwing a party and so on. That's that's the beginning. If you look at the book, the end of the book, the conclusion also describes his kingdom. Right? So you see the parallel between A and Z, the beginning of the book and the end of the book. Okay, let's continue. The beginning of the book discusses the two private feasts that were going on, that they were celebrating in the empire, in particular in the capital, two private feasts. At the end of the Book of Esther, it also describes two feasts, but a little bit differently. These feasts are specifically for the celebrations that the Jews are celebrating, having been saved from extermination. Okay, continuing, towards the beginning of the book, Esther appears and she's chosen as the queen. Remember, Vashti had been exiled and they had a beauty contest, and Esther wins. She's now the queen. At the end of the book, Esther appears again in front of the king, but she requests an additional day to do battle. Towards the beginning of the book, there's a description of the stature of Haman, who he was. And in the Hebrew text, it particularly uses these two Hebrew words. I wrote them in English so you can see it. Gidal and Vayinaseu. He was great and he was raised up high. At the end of the book, it describes the stature of Mordecai, right? And it uses the same root words, Gadol and Manasseh, right? The same words. Continuing, at the beginning of the book, Haman comes and he casts lots, and he decides there's going to be a war on the 13th of Adar. That's when he's going to exterminate all the Jews. But what happens at the end of the book? They do have a war on the 13th of Adar, but it's not a war to exterminate the Jews, but rather quite the opposite. Haman is hanged along with his sons, and the Jews are successfully defending themselves. The first half of the book, the king Ahasuerus gives his ring to Haman. Haman writes letters about the extermination. Mordecai tears his clothing, and the Jews are fasting because they've been subjected to the possibility of being killed, of being exterminated. Towards the end of the book, that same ring is given to Mordecai. Mordecai, also like Haman, writes letters about the victory. Mordecai is dressed in the royal garments. At the beginning half, he's tearing his clothes. Now he's dressed in garments. And instead of the Jews fasting, the Jews are feasting. Esther invites them to a party, Haman and Ahasuerus. Esther has the second party. We see the parallel. Haman consults with his associates. That's when he decides he's going to hang Mordecai on the gallows. And what happens? Haman once again consults with his associates. Okay, now I'm going to reveal the middle in 1 second. But look at this. Look at how stunning this is, folks. You read the book and you don't even see that it's there. This incredible, what's called a chiastic structure. And this appears in many places, by the way, in the Tanakh. It's one of the ways that we see the divinity of the book. We see the genius of the book. And the middle one, the middle verse of a chiastic structure is critical because it is something we can hang our hats on that is a critical theme to the entire book. What happens right in the middle of the Book of Esther? It doesn't have a parallel because it's so important. That's when it says the king cannot sleep. That's right. When Haman is entering, about to ask for permission to kill Mordecai, and things turn around. This is the episode in the book that suddenly all of this buildup turns around and everything starts going bad for Haman, good for Mordecai and the Jews. The first half is good for Haman, bad for the Jews. The second half is the opposite. It's the turnaround. So this is the fulcrum. It's the middle verse that the entire book hinges upon, that there is a great turnaround, right? There's a turnaround and everything shifts and everything changes. Look at the structure and the beauty of this book. Not only because I laid it out for you with beautiful colors, but the structure of the story, the parallels between the first half and the second half. That's what's called a chiasm, right? A to Z, B to Y, right? C to X, and so on. Okay? I hope you guys all got that. You'll get it all in the recording. Okay? But what does all this mean? So now let's jump in to some of the important themes of the book. You'll see it more than once. In the 12th month, which is the month of the Adar, on the 13th day thereof, when the king's order and his edict drew near to be put into execution on the day that the Jews' enemies looked forward to ruling over them, it was reversed. The Jews ruled over their enemies. This is one of the biggest themes of the book, is the reversal. Things are looking bad, and boom, a great turnaround. Again, we see it. Esther 9:22, as the days when the Jews rested from their enemies in the month, that was reversed for them, from grief to joy, and from mourning to a festive day, to make them days of feasting and joy, and sending portions one to another and gifts to the poor. That center verse. It's all about the reversal, right? When your fortunes are looking terrible, when it looks like things are not going your way, to say the least, and suddenly God steps in a very secretive way, and everything gets reversed. We'll come back to that. Right? And this is, for example, we see in the book of Psalms, chapter 30, verse 12, you turn my mourning into dancing. Okay? The book of Lamentation has the opposite. The joy of our house has ceased. Our dance is turned into mourning. Okay? But Psalm 30, verse 12, this is what's based on the idea that we read the Megillah, we read the Book of Esther because we are celebrating this reversal of the turning of mourning into joy, into dancing. Another example of this is like in the book of Isaiah, for a small moment have I forsaken you, and with great mercy will I gather you, right? There's a moment where it seems that everything, God has forsaken us, but suddenly there's great mercy, right? The book of Song of Songs, what is happening? Behold, he, meaning God, is standing behind our wall, looking from the windows, peering from the lattices, right? It doesn't appear that God is there. Things are going bad, but he's looking in from behind. Don't give up. Okay, so let's discuss some of the important themes in addition to this reversal. Okay, so here, Book of Esther, chapter 3. When Haman saw that Mordecai would neither kneel nor prostrate himself from before him, Haman became full of wrath. He was so angry that this Jew wouldn't bow down to him. But it seemed contemptible to him to lay his hands on Mordecai alone. Haman didn't want to just kill Mordecai, for they had told him Mordecai's nationality, and Haman sought to destroy all the Jews. What did Haman say? Mordecai, I hate this guy, I hate him, and now I hate all Jews. And this is a very common theme throughout all of Jewish history, that people look at one Jew, two Jews, that maybe they don't, for whatever reason, they didn't like them, and they extend that to all Jews. So this book, the Book of Esther, has a lot of very, very timely messages for what we see happening in the world today. We see an extraordinary rise in anti-Semitism. Now, for those who are on here that are not Jewish, you may not have noticed it, but ask your Jewish friends and they will tell you there's an unbelievable rise in what's going on in the world with anti-Semitism, and Jews are quite concerned and quite afraid. But it's something that's goes all the way back to the Megillah, because it's not enough that it's one. Haman sought to destroy all of them. Here's another theme. Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people. Haman is talking about the Jews. He says they are scattered and separate among the people. Right? First of all, do you understand that that's a contradiction? If they're scattered, it means that they're scattered among the people. If they're separate, then they're not scattered, meaning they're separate from them. So which one is it? Are they scattered or are they separate? And this is, by the way, you're going to hear from anti-Semites incredible contradictions. You'll hear over the centuries, you'll hear, we hate Jews. Why? They're too rich. Or we hate Jews. Why? Because they're too poor. They're bloodsuckers, right? We hate Jews because they're too controlling. We hate Jews because they're too separate. They're not part, and constantly throwing out contradictions. It's another historical theme. And what else does he say? Their laws differ from those of every people. They do not keep the king's laws. Another source of anti-Semitism. Oh, Jews, they think they're better, they're different, they keep their laws, they don't follow our laws, they're different. Right? And this is what Haman uses to convince King Ahasuerus to decree to kill all the Jews. Right? Another theme. The letters are sent out to destroy, kill, and cause to perish all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women. Right? This is a theme we see in Jewish history. We see this with Hitler. We see this with Amalek. We see this with Haman. We see that it's not enough to kill the Jews in their own neighborhood. Right? What did Hitler want to do? He wanted to kill Jews everywhere in the world. Right? And another important theme here. This is a very well-known verse. If you remain, and Mordecai says to Esther, trying to convince her to go to the king, says, if you remain silent at this time, relief and rescue will arise for the Jews from elsewhere, and you and your father's household will perish, and who knows whether at a time like this you will attain the kingdom. What is he saying to her? He's saying, if you don't speak up now, right? He doesn't say, if you don't speak up now, we're all going to die. Because Mordecai knows that the Bible, God had promised the Jewish people that they're going to be an eternal people. But what does Mordecai say? If you don't speak up now, right, relief and rescue it's going to come from somewhere else. But who knows that you, Esther, and your family, who knows if you're going to survive? Because maybe, just maybe, you became the queen, or at this very moment, you need to step onto the stage of history and play the role of Savior. And this verse is so critical. It is a very important theme, is that every person has the ability to step onto the stage of history and to make a difference. Not to say someone else, it's not me, I'm a nothing. No, who knows, for such a time as this, if you remain silent and you don't step up, you are blowing an opportunity that God is giving you. And this is one of the important themes. Okay? Now, another one here. Haman is talking to his family, and he's saying to them, look in the middle here. Haman said, Esther did not even bring anyone to the party she made except me, and tomorrow too I'm invited to her with the king. Haman is invited. He's one of two people invited. Him and the king of the largest empire of the time, the most powerful man in the world, King Ahasuerus, and him are invited. But what does Haman say? All of this is worth nothing to me every time I see Mordecai the Jew sitting in the king's gate, right? He is so jealous of Mordecai. For what? Who was Mordecai? He was so jealous of him that, right, destroyed him. It's jealousy, this burning jealousy of Mordecai the Jew that literally destroys him. Hey, do you know how many Jews were in Germany in World War II when Hitler came to power? It was about 500,000. It was not even 1% of Germany was Jewish. It was 0.08, right? Less than 1% of Germany was Jewish. Less than 1%. Yet they were the problem, right? Hitler couldn't take it. Couldn't take being the chancellor of Germany as long as there were Jews, right? This is also a very important theme. Now, what about the name? Where does the name Purim, the holiday of Purim, come from? It comes from the Book of Esther. What does it say? For Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the adversary of all the Jews, had devised to destroy the Jews. He cast the poor. What does poor mean? That is the lot, a lottery, to terrify them and to destroy them. Therefore, they call these days Purim after the name Pur. Right? In Hebrew, it means a lot. Okay? And these days shall be remembered and celebrated throughout every generation, in every family, every province, every city. And these days of Purim shall not be revoked from amidst the Jews, and their memory shall not cease from their seed. Folks, we are reading a text that is literally 2,500 years old. And do you realize this coming Tuesday night, right? Starting Monday night, we will celebrate Purim. It is incredible. It is unbelievable that this idea that we are celebrating 2,500 years later, the holiday of Purim, and you see it, its name received 2,500 years ago. How is it celebrated? How do we celebrate Purim? So it tells us in the Book of Esther, right? As the days when the Jews rested from their enemies, in the month that was reversed from them, as we spoke about, from grief to joy, from mourning to a festive day, to make them days of feasting and joy. That's number one in the green, you see it. Sending portions to one another, that's number two. And gifts to the poor. We'll discuss each one of them. That's three. The fourth one is, of course, the reading of the Book of Esther. So there's four things. But that's what the verse mentions there. So the first one, feasting and joy. So take a look at these little pictures I put up there on your screen, right? People get together to rejoice, have parties. And you might notice These people are dressed in a very funny way. Okay, they're wearing costumes, right? You see, here's Princess Leia from Star Wars. Right? You see, people wear costumes. We'll talk about that. Why? Why did costumes become part of Purim? And it is not, I'll give you a hint, has nothing to do with Halloween. This is not the Jewish Halloween. Okay, it's called the Purim Seuda, the Purim meal, and we have a big feast. That's feasting and joy. Okay, there's another picture. Okay. The other thing that it said was, oops, let's go back, sending portions to one another. Okay, that in Hebrew is called, I should have written it for you here. It's called Mishloach Manot. We prepare all kinds of goodies and we send them to other people, to friends. It's the idea to bring unity. When there's disunity, when there's hatred, when there's anger, it never leads to anything good. So what do? Right? We pack up 10, 20 of these, 30 of them, and some people make themes out of them and send them out to people you know, people you like, your friends, people maybe you don't know so well, to generate a feeling of unity between people. So that's number 2, how it's celebrated. Okay. Okay, let's talk about the costumes, but I didn't mention the third way. You saw going back, it said gifts to the poor. The third thing that's mentioned is that we give charity on that day. And in Jewish tradition, you never refuse anybody that asks for charity on Purim. Okay? So let's talk about the costumes for a moment. Right? You see this family dressed like chess pieces. Okay? People do themes. Of course, you don't have to. But where does this idea come from? And I want you to listen carefully if you don't know, because it's very powerful. The Book of Esther is one of the books of the Bible that God's name is not mentioned once. It's not mentioned at all in the 10 chapters of the Bible. The 10 chapters of the Book of Esther. What's the idea there? What's the message? The story of Purim seems to be, on the surface, a very natural occurring story. That the events are just, something that happens over a long period of time. The king makes parties. The king is mad at his wife, and there's a beauty contest, and Esther becomes queen, and this and that. They are seemingly very natural events, and you don't notice God's hand explicitly. It's very different than the story, say, of the Exodus from Egypt, where you see miraculous plague after plague. You see the splitting of the Red Sea. Those are very open miracles. The story of the Book of Esther is miraculous, but in a very different way, where God's hand is very hidden, right? You don't see it explicitly. And it's not until the story ends that they can look back and say, we see the path. We see where God was. We see him looking in from behind and controlling and manipulating the events. But we don't see it explicitly. And so that theme is expressed by the wearing of a costume. What is a costume? It's when you hide who you really are. The same way that God was hidden in the story, where he's not mentioned explicitly, so too the costume represents that. Halloween is a pagan holiday. Okay? This is something different. Okay? It represents the idea that God is not always so explicit, but he is always there. Okay? Here's a family dressed like the Where's Waldo, and you have a little parade, kids in the costumes. Right? That's my son Ari. These are our neighbors. My house, by the way. And these are a family decided to dress like wild dogs because we have sometimes a problem with wild dogs hanging out by the garbage. So everyone comes up with cute ideas. Another 2 things I want to mention here. A food that's eaten on the holiday of Purim, right? It's called Haman Tashin, right? The word Haman, or in Hebrew, it's Oznei Haman, right? The tradition is that Haman wore a 3-cornered hat, right? And so we eat these as part of the celebration. What's a grogger? A grogger is a noisemaker. When we read the Book of Esther in the synagogue, we read it out loud. Everyone's there, and many people come in their costumes. It's very festive. And people, every time the name Haman is mentioned, they'll make noise, like as if to drown him out, to stomp him out. Some people will use a grogger. There's all kinds of things that people use to stamp out Haman and to make noise. It's a very fun holiday. Now, folks, if you haven't listened until now, which of course I'm saying that facetiously, I want you to pay attention doubly because I'm going to show you something that if your mind hasn't been blown now by by the chiastic structure or anything we've spoken about, it is about to be blown. But you have to pay attention. But if you miss this, or if it goes a little over you, I urge you, watch the recording, reverse it, because this is going to blow your mind. Okay? And I don't say that lightly. Okay? The Book of Esther says as follows. It says the 10 sons of Haman, the sons of Hammedatha, the adversary of the Jews, they slew. But on the spoil, they didn't lay their hands. Right? The 10 sons of Haman they were hanged along with him. Okay? Now, you'll also notice 3 verses later, right? Take a look. This is verse 10, chapter 9, verse 10. This is chapter 9, verse 13. Esther said, if it pleases the king, let tomorrow too be granted to the Jews who do as today's decree. Let them hang Haman's 10 sons on the gallows. My friends, what is she talking about? What just happened? The 10 sons of Haman were already hanged. They're already killed. They slew them. Then Esther comes and said, let us do tomorrow and let them hang the 10 sons of Haman. What is she talking about? They were already hanged. So the biblical commentators struggle with this. They're not really sure what Esther's referring to. Okay? And they say maybe she means they should take the dead bodies and hang them because it'll disgrace them. But you see, there's a textual problem here. Why is she asking 3 verses later to hang them when they've already been hanged? Okay? So what does she say, though? If you look carefully, she says, let tomorrow too be granted to the Jews who do as today's decree. She's saying, let us do tomorrow what we've done today, right? Maybe tomorrow, and sometimes in the Bible, tomorrow doesn't literally mean tomorrow. It means somewhere in the future. Okay? There were, in history, right, there were 3 people that you can identify that wanted to destroy and kill every single Jew alive. Often you'll have anti-Semites that they're very happy to kill the Jews in their neighborhood or in their country. But it's the rare anti-Semite that wants to literally kill every Jew in the world. So, for example, Amalek in the Bible, Haman in the Bible, and in our days, Hitler. Okay? Hitler wanted to destroy every Jew, not just the Jews in Germany, but he wanted to kill all Jews. And look what happens. Right? This is from Hitler. This is a quote from him. If I'm ever really in power, destruction of the Jews will be my first and most important job. The Jewish question today was no longer a German problem. It had become a world problem. This is Hitler. What happens when Hitler is defeated? At Nuremberg, they put Nazis on trial. Goring, who was the head of the Air Forces from the New York Times, killed himself. 10 others are hanged in Nuremberg prison for Nazi war crimes. Doomed men on gallows, pray for Germany. What does Esther say? If it pleases the king, let us do tomorrow. Let us do the same. Let us hang the 10 sons of Haman, meaning the descendants. Let us do the same thing in the future. There's a prophecy going on here, right? Let us do the same. And what happens? There are 10 Nazis who are hanged. Okay. And you might say, Okay, that's a cute connection. Very nice. Okay. Stick with me, folks. This is just the beginning of this. Watch what I'm going to do here. Okay. When you read the book of Esther in the Megillah, okay, there are three letters that are written very small. Okay. You'll see here, this is the list. It's fine if you can't read Hebrew. This is the list of the 10 sons of Haman that are hanged. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, that's not a name. That's his ish. That means just a person. Okay, there are 10 sons here. Now, I circled it for you here. There are three letters that are written small. Okay, even if you can't read Hebrew, you can see Hebrew's read right to left. Look at the letters. They all go from here to here. And whoever's writing on the screen, please don't do that. It's okay. I'm going to have to disable annotation for others. Gosh. Okay. Let's see how we erase this. Okay, there we go. All right, sorry about that, folks. Okay, you can see that there are three letters. The letters extend from here to here, but look, this one's tiny, this one's tiny, and this one's tiny. Right? And there's one letter that's big. Okay, so three small letters, one big one. These are all contained within the names of the 10 sons of Haman. And it must be written like that. That's how it's written on the parchment for hundreds, thousands of years. Okay? Nobody knows why, but that's how it's written. Now, I want to explain something to you. Okay? One second here. Okay. These three letters, I just put them here for you so you can see them better. The letter Taf, the letter Shin, and the small letter Zion. And those are the three letters that are small, and one letter, the Vav over here, that's big. Okay, those are the mysterious letters that appear in the 10 sons. And what do they mean? Okay, so every Hebrew letter has a numerical value. Okay, so if you total this up, right, it comes out to 707. Okay, I want to explain something to you. What year is it now? In the Jewish calendar, the year is 786, 5786. That's the year on the Jewish calendar, right? And the secular calendar, it's 2026. And the Jewish calendar is a different year system, 5786. Right? 1,000 years ago, it was 4786. 2,000 years ago, it was 3786, and so on. Okay. The first time it was 786, 1786, 27, 37. Okay, you understand that? Now, this is the year that we're in now. I put a box around it. But in Hebrew, when you refer to the year, we don't say this number. It's implied. Like we only say the year is 786. It only happens every 1,000 years. You don't need to say it's 5786. We say it's Tafshin Zion or 707. Okay? But look how many times 786 appeared in history. Count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is the sixth time in all of Jewish history that it's 786, but it's 5786. Right? You follow what I'm saying? Because this is a zero. 786, right? And so on. Okay. Now, what about 707? How many times has that appeared? Right? 70. Okay. So 5707, that's the sixth time that it's appeared. Okay. So, folks, you need to watch it on that. I need to annotate here so you can make it a little easier for you to follow. Afshin Zion, which is 707, okay, that appears six times in Jewish history. The letter Vav here, this is six. Okay? So what you have is the letter Vav, right? And then you have Taf, Shin, Zayin. So the sixth time that Taf Shin Zayin appears in history is this year, 5707. Okay. We're in 5786. Okay? When was 5707? Okay. Take out my little calendar here. So if this year is 5786 minus 5707, it was 79 years ago. Okay. Now, let's oops. I want to clear my annotations here. Okay, 1 second. Okay, actually, let's leave it for now. So 5707. What happened 79 years ago in 5707? What happened in the Hebrew year 57? What does that correspond to on the English calendar? Right? Guess what, folks? You want to see? This. This happened in the Hebrew year 5707 or in the English year. Right? Look at the calendar. Let's second. I'll move my annotations here. I want to easier to see the screen. Here, all drawings. Okay. On October 16th, 1946, okay, that's when the 10 Nazis were hanged. Look at this. This is a Jewish calendar. What year is that? 5707. Okay, October 1946. Those letters that I showed you in the 10 sons of Haman, in his name, Tav Shin Zayin and the Vav, that refers to 5707. On the 16th of October, right? That's corresponding 1946. That's when the 10 Nazis were hanged. Okay. Now, two more things I want to add to this. Look at this day on the Jewish calendar. It's called Hoshana Rabbah. Hoshana Rabbah is the day that in Jewish tradition is a day of the judgment of the non-Jewish world. The last piece of information I'm going to share with you, and please, by all means, go look this up on the internet. When the 10 Nazis were being hanged, there was one fellow named Julius Streicher. Julius Streicher went up to the gallows, and just as he was about to be hanged, he looked out at the crowd, and guess what he yelled out? He yelled, Purim Fest 1946. And the New York Times reports that. And that's what he said. Purim Fest 1946. He understood the connection. Folks, that is mind blowing. If you didn't get all that, watch the recording slowly. Watch it 100 times if you have to, but this is worth every ounce of that. So, folks,